Is there anything unique about human beings? There is. We're the only creatures with fully developed moral sentiments. We're obsessed with morality as social creatures. We need to know why people are doing what they're doing. And I personally am obsessed with morality. It's all due to this woman, Sister Mary Maristella, also known as my mom. As an altar boy, I breathed in a lot of incense, and I learned to say phrases in Latin. But I also had time to think about whether my mother's top-down morality applied to everybody. I saw that people who were religious and non-religious were equally obsessed with morality, and I thought maybe there was an earthly basis for moral decisions. But I wanted to go further than to say our brains make us moral. I want to know if there's a chemistry of morality. I want to know if there was a moral molecule. After 10 years of experiments, I found it. Oh, would you like to see it? I brought some with me. This little syringe contains the moral molecule. It's called oxytocin. So oxytocin is a simple and ancient molecule found only in mammals. In rodents, it was known to make mothers care for their offspring, and in some creatures, allowed for toleration of burrow mates. But in humans, it was only known to facilitate birth and breastfeeding in women, and is released by both sexes during sex. So when I had this idea that oxytocin might be the moral molecule, I did what most of us do. I tried it out on some colleagues. And one of them told me, "Paul, that is the world's stupidest idea." "It is," he said, "only a female molecule. Can't be that important." But I countered, "Well, men's brains make this too. There must be a reason why." But he was right. It was a stupid idea. But it was testably stupid. In other words, I thought I could design an experiment to see if oxytocin made people moral. Turns out it wasn't so easy. First of all, oxytocin is a shy molecule. Baseline levels are near zero without some stimulus to cause its release. And when it's produced, it has a 3-minute half-life and degrades rapidly at room temperature. So this experiment would have to cause a surge of oxytocin, have to grab it fast and keep it cold. I think I can do that. Now luckily, oxytocin is produced both in the brain and in the blood, so I could do this experiment without learning neurosurgery. Then I had to measure morality. So taking on morality with a capital M is a huge project. So I started smaller. Thought I'd study one single virtue: trustworthiness. Why? I had shown in the early 2000s that countries with a higher proportion of trustworthy people are more prosperous. So in these countries, more economic transactions occur and more wealth is created, alleviating poverty. So poor countries are by and large low trust countries. So if I understood the chemistry of trustworthiness, I might help alleviate poverty. But I'm also a skeptic. I don't want to just ask people, "Are you trustworthy?" So instead I use the Jerry Maguire approach to research. If you're so virtuous, show me the money. So what we do in my lab is we tempt people with the virtue and vice by using money. Let me show you how we do that. So we recruit some people for an experiment. They'll get $10 if they agree to show up. Then we give them lots of instruction, and we never, ever deceive them. Then we match them in pairs by computer. And in that pair, one person gets a message saying, "Do you want to give up some of your $10 you earned for being here and ship it to someone else in the lab?" But the trick is, you can't see them, you can't talk to them, you only do it one time. Now, whatever you give up gets tripled in the other person's account. Going to make them a lot wealthier. And they get a message by computer saying, "Person one sent you this amount of money. Do you want to keep it all, or do you want to send some amount back?" Okay, so think about this experiment for a minute. You're going to sit in these hard chairs for an hour and a half. Some mad scientist is going to jab your arm with a needle and take 4 tubes of blood. And now you want me to give up this money and ship it to a stranger? So this was the birth of vampire economics. Make a decision, give me some blood. So in fact, experimental economists had run this task around the world, and for much higher stakes. And the consensus view was that the transfer from the first person to the second was a measure of trust. And the transfer from the second person back to the first measured trustworthiness. But in fact, economists were flummoxed on why the second person would ever return any money. They assumed money is good. Why not keep it all? That's not what we found. We found 90% of the first decision makers sent money, and of those who received money, 95% returned some of it. But why? Well, by measuring oxytocin, we found that the more money the second person received, the more their brain produced oxytocin, and the more oxytocin on board, the more money they returned. So we have a biology of trustworthiness. But wait, what's wrong with this experiment? Two things. One is that nothing in the body happens in isolation. So we measured 9 other molecules that interact with oxytocin, and they didn't have any effect. But the second is that I still only had this indirect relationship between oxytocin and trustworthiness. I didn't know for sure oxytocin caused trustworthiness. So for my next experiment, I know I'd have to go into the brain and manipulate oxytocin directly. I used everything short of a drill to get oxytocin into my own brain. And I found I could do it with a nasal inhaler. So along with colleagues in Zurich, we put 200 men on oxytocin or placebo, had them do that same trust task with money, and we found that those on oxytocin not only showed more trust, we could more than double the number of people who sent all their money to a stranger, all without altering mood or cognition. So oxytocin is the trust molecule, but is it the moral molecule? Using the oxytocin inhaler, we ran more studies. We showed that oxytocin infusion increases generosity in unilateral monetary transfers by 80%. We showed it increases donations to charity by 50%. I've also investigated non-pharmacologic ways to raise oxytocin. These include massage, dancing, and praying. Yes, my mom was happy about that last one. And whenever we raise oxytocin, people willingly open up their wallets and share money with strangers. But why do they do this? What does it feel like when your brain is flooded with oxytocin?